Seems to be a high level of anxiety in our world today, and there's good reason for that. We're aware of it, if we're aware at all, that there's a lot of violence going on in our world. There are a lot of refugees in our world that are seeking homelands. There's a lot of fear about welcoming refugees, for the fear that the violence that they're fleeing may come with them to our own lands. There's a high anxiety about gathering together in public places and even being about celebrations around the certain traveling to be with family brings with it a whole host of fears and worries, and there's it can get irrational at a point, but you can't say to the fears and the anxieties that are part of our world, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry, be happy. Remember that song? Has there ever been a more silly song? Is there any more nonsensical advice to give to a highly anxious person than don't worry about it? Anxiety is irrational. It comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place where trust is lacking, where hope does not dwell. If you've ever had an anxiety around something, you already know how irrational it is. And talking yourself into sanity is nearly impossible to do. The word anxiety comes from another Latin word. I didn't know we were studying Latin today, or I might have written my sermon a little differently, but is the Latin root angere. And angere, which is the root of our word anxiety, literally means to strangle or to choke. Squeeze the life breath out of. That same word, angere, is the root for our word angina. That sudden, painful onset of pain that precedes a heart attack. That same word, angere, is the root for our word anger. It's no wonder a lot of anxious people are also angry people, because they're not far in root from one another. No, let's look at what to do with our anxiety, what to do with the things we fear, what to do with the darkness of the time in which we're living, by looking back to another anxious time, an ancient time, when God's people were living in fear, anxiety, and dread, without hope, without promise in the world, when they were living in the darkness of exile. It began with a siege of violence by a foreign power, much stronger than their own. They have already been paying tribute to this foreign power, but now in defiance, the power, the army of the kingdom has now surrounded the city and is besieging it. First, there's famine, because the food supplies are cut off and the people are hungry. And then it's pestilence, because being in enclosed places and able to move about, sickness seems to go across. And then comes the actual violence of collapse and destruction. The walls come down. The houses are destroyed and burned. The livestock are slaughtered and left for the flies to eat. The temple, the symbol of God's presence and protection among the people, is not only destroyed, but is ransacked. The holy things by which the priests and the Levites meditate God's care and protection for the people and forgiveness to the people, they're all taken as works of art, or vessels of gold. And the people, the Levites, the priests, the noble families, the people of means, those who are educated, those who are esteemed in the community, the merchants, those who are held in high regard, they're all gathered together, stripped of their dignity and herded like cattle out of the destructed city and out across the barren wastes of the desert, separated from the land of God's promise, no more to ever be mediated or comforted by God's presence and protection for them in the temple. They're herded like cattle across the desert and settled as refugees, bereft of hope or promise in a foreign land. They were highly anxious too. And yet God begins to speak. And in that place of devastation begin the glimmers of hope that God will come and deliver God's people, that God will come and send Messiah to reclaim the people and gather them again and to lead them safely back into God's care, provision, and protection. I am the Lord your God, the prophet declares. I have created you, God declares, and I formed you, God declares. I shaped you into the people I called you to be. I formed you and gave you your personality. You are unique and special, and I have redeemed you. And I know you by name. You shall walk through the waters, and I will be with you. You shall cross the rivers, and I will be your protection. You shall walk through fire, and I will keep you safe. You are precious to me. I give honor to your life and existence. I will gather you. Do not fear. You know, there's a difference between watching and waiting for some glimmer of hope. I intentionally ordered it this way because we're not them. We're not the exiles that Isaiah spoke to in a foreign land. We're not watching for some glimmer of hope. We're not waiting for something yet to appear. No, we're people waiting for the light and watching for its signs being shown in the darkness of our world, because the light has shone in the darkness already. We light the candles each Sunday in Advent and light the Christ candle on Christmas Eve to remind us that the light of heaven is already shining now in the darkness of our world. And so we wait for the signs of where that light is, because they keep us encouraged and hope. And we welcome that light among us as we gather for worship in this season, not only to reassure us, but to begin glowing in our hearts and lives so that we ourselves become beacons and witnesses to that light in the midst of the darkness, dispelling the darkness as those who are claimed, named, and redeemed by God. Let us pray. God,